Hey nerdy knitters, Tanya here. In this video we're looking at the twin rib pattern, this pattern right here. We'll look at the pattern and work a few rows, and we'll also look at balancing the pattern horizontally across the row so your right and your left edges match, which is important for things like scarves and blankets. So be sure to stick around to the end, and if you want to jump to any point in the video, use the timestamp links in the video description box down below. Here's the twin rib pattern. It's reversible. It lies flat, so it would be great for a blanket or a scarf. But even though it's considered a rib, it stretches a little bit, but really not as much as a regular 1x1, 2x2. Doesn't stretch that much. It's more decorative than anything. But it is a very nice fabric when you want something a little different and you're working on a blanket or a scarf and you want something reversible. As you can see, twin rib, it gets its name from these columns of stockinette right there, those knit stitches broken up in between. This pattern, it's really very, very simple. You can see right here, it's a multiple of 6 stitches and 2 rows. You start with a knit 3, purl 3 for the first row. Then on the next row, you knit 1, purl 1. So it's a combination of 2 different stitch patterns, 2 different ribs that are worked on alternating rows, and it produces this texture. So knit 3, purl 3 on the front side of the work, knit 1, purl 1 on the back side of the work, and that is the whole repeat. And you can see how it produces those columns right there of purls and columns of stockinette, as we can see in our example here. Here's the written instructions. Knit 3, purl 3, and then knit 1, purl 1. Let's work a row or 2 and see how that looks. I'm back on my first row. It's a very simple pattern. We just knit the first 3 and then purl the next 3. And you can follow the pattern if you want to make sure you're in the right place. If you put your knitting down, you can see where there's a knit stitch. I should definitely be knitting that and not purling it. So our pattern sort of matches up with that. As we progress, final knit 3, and then purl 3. And that is row 1 and all of the right side rows. Then when we flip our work, now it's knit 1, purl 1. So it's a very easy pattern to remember. And there's that columns of knit, so I know that's a knit stitch if I ever lose my place. That can help me find it again. So if you wanted to use this in a scarf, you would want a multiple of 6 stitches. But after we finish this, let's take a look at how we would balance the pattern. Knit 1, purl 1, I'm almost finished. Because if we're working a blanket or a scarf, we want the right and the left edge to match. So balancing is important. That's why it's important to learn how to read your stitches, get a bit nerdy with your knitting. So here's our pattern. When we look at it, we can see, of course, it's balanced in this direction. But if we look at our edges, we've got a knit stitch over here, and then some of those purl and garter bits in there, and then another knit stitch. But on this side, we don't have that knit stitch. It just ends with some of that, the purl and that garter ridge in the middle. So to balance this pattern, all that means is we want the right edge and the left edge to match. We want them to mirror each other, to be the same. And the pattern as set right now doesn't do that. So to balance that, that's where you get those +1, +3 stitches. Right now, this pattern is not balanced. We can see this edge does not match that edge. So to balance it, we need to add or subtract some stitches. So for our example, I'm just going to subtract some. We will take out those final 3. And now if we look at our pattern, it begins and ends with the same stitches. But what that does to our instructions, we have a knit 3, purl 3, knit 3, purl 3, but now we have to add that plus 3. That's where you get your written instructions, those extra stitches. When it says 6 stitches plus 3, those stitches are used to balance the pattern across the row horizontally. So we have knit 3, purl 3, knit 3, purl 3. There's our pattern. There's our plus 3. We need to add 3 more right there. And that will give us a balanced pattern. And going in the other direction, we can see that also changes. Now it's not a knit 1, purl 1. Remember, we're on a wrong side row, so this blank box represents a purl. So we would do a purl 1, and then our repeat starts. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. So it's a slight change. We have to add a few stitches if we wanted to balance this pattern for a blanket, but that's really a simple thing to do. You have your basic pattern. You decide perhaps you want to start in with purl stitches instead. We could take off these stitches. Now our pattern is balanced in a different way, but it's still purl 3, knit 3, purl 3, knit 3, purl 3. So we still need that extra 3 stitches. Right now they're on the front. So balancing a pattern is simple if we want to do that for a flat object. If we were knitting in the round, we wouldn't look at our numbers here. They would all be on this side. But this pattern we would use exactly as written, just that little box right there. But for working flat and for balancing a pattern, so the right and left edges match, it's not difficult. You just have to add or subtract a few stitches to get exactly what you want. We could balance it this way. We could balance it that way. Either one, we're just adding 3 stitches. So it would now be 6 stitches plus 3 to get the pattern to balance. And there we have twin rib. A very simple pattern, adding to a blanket, a scarf, a wrap. It's a great pattern, versatile, reversible. And if you like to get a bit nerdy with your knitting, click the subscribe button down below.